I'm not an expert on banking, but if you read the articles, you begin to realize that unlike today, banks were kind of slippery about how their money was used sometimes, not everybody, but in his case, he started loans and deals with his own companies. There were also customers of his bank, which is a public bank, and you aren't supposed to commingle money like that.
Well, and we're going to get into that because that's the beginning of his downfall.
Right.
However, in preparing for this, I called my brother, who is a lifelong banker, and I said, and he read the stories and was amazed at Smith's story and just, you know, blown away by his entrepreneurial spirit, let's call it. And I said, well, now, so do you think he was a crook? Do you think, how would you judge him? And he said, you know, it's hard to say because these rules evolved. He said, that's the problem, is when Smith started, there were no rules. There were very few rules. And so he kept banking while the rules were evolving. And in some cases, he cut corners, or in some cases, he got advice from his lawyers, and apparently the comptroller of the currency back in D.C., who said what he was doing was okay. You know, we'll get more into that. I want to go on to the Padres. So when did he start the Padres? Do you remember the dates?
Let's see. He bought the Padres in 1957. Is that right? And the Padres began as a minor league Pacific Coast League team.
But why did he buy them? I can't remember why he bought them. Civic Pride, was that it? It was really cheap.
I think it was Lane. Who was his first name? Was Franklin Lane, or
well, anyway, they named Lane Field after him.
Yeah, Lane was the owner of the Padres. He brought them down from L.A. and he was getting financial problems, so he wanted to unload the team. And as long as Smith was buying all these other companies, somehow he said, "Oh man!" Somebody talked him into buying the Padres, and that's part of Smith's charm, or historically, was that he would come to the rescue of San Diego institutions.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing that's, as I recall the article, he was worried that Padres would move to some other place, so he bought them to keep them in San Diego. And he never made any money on the team, really. But the Lane Field was at the foot of Broadway, which is there for 25 years or so. And then...
and the city even considered putting the convention center on Lane Field.
Right, and a number of other things. But anyway, in 1957, or soon after he bought the team, he built a replacement called Westgate Park, after his company's name, Westgate, California, his company, where Fashion Valley Shopping Center is today.
Yeah.
And so this is another element of this story of San Diego and Smith, which is that downtown after World War II was struggling with growth, and so there was this push to develop Mission Valley, and his was one of the early developments of a non-dairy, non-farming element of Mission Valley.
And he partnered with, or at least he must have partnered with somebody named Ernest Hahn, who had one of his banks up in Hawthorne, I think.
Right.
And
he was a member of his bank board of Smith's bank.
But was he essentially a developer? No, he was a banker.
No, he was a builder. He was a contractor.
But he was on his board, maybe.
Right. Okay. You'd always have builders and contractors on your bank boards.
Okay.
Because they would give loans to developers, and so you need to have that representation on a bank.
So Fashion Valley was Hahn's idea.
Yes.
But Smith...
He built it. He didn't actually own he didn't own the mall. It was sold to another shopping center, but he was a developer of the Fashion Valley Mall.
Okay.
And and then San Diego Stadium, was Qualcomm Stadium, was built about 10 years later in 1967. So when the Padres moved to the new ballpark, and about the same time the Fashion Valley Shopping Center was built, then ballpark became the Fashion Valley, and actually that's where the Union Tribune moved a few years later.
And the funny thing was, in both cases of moving from Lane Field to Westgate Park, and from Westgate Park to the stadium, and the concomitant development of Fashion Valley, Smith seemed not to be the prime mover, but going along with what people wanted to do. And he had the means to help them.
Yeah.
So it was, you know, part of his growth into being this big tycoon and this big Mr. San Diego of the century. In his earlier life, a lot of work, a lot of gutsiness. Later on, he kind of, seems to me, he was just kind of being generous and civic-minded and went along with these things, and he had the means to do it.